Hello everybody and welcome back to Random Bits. So yes, I know I've been talking a lot about SpongeBob lately, but I mean, come on. There was just so many episodes of SpongeBob that it's hard not to talk about it. Plus, I keep finding excuses to talk about SpongeBob, so there you go. I hope you enjoy. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about some of the episodes that a lot of people really say they're the best of the best. They're the ones that stand out. These are like the good episodes of SpongeBob. However, in my opinion, I just can't stand these episodes, or I find them too overrated, or I just find them plain boring, and just something that just ain't for me. So it'd be kind of cool to talk about the 10 SpongeBob episodes that people like that I just hate. So yeah, and yes, there will be a lot of honorable mentions. Anyway, let's get on to the countdown and let's go to number 10, which is Computer Overload. Now, yeah, the ones at the start of this list aren't terrible or anything. They're just ones that, I personally don't find so good, but I don't really hear complaints about from others. So, yes, this is the dreaded Season 6. And, yes, we are starting the list off with a Season 6 episode. What fun. So, Computer Overload is about Plankton and Karen. And that's it. Plankton is a big jerk to his wife and builds all these dumb robots who are supposed to be a replacement to Karen, and they all just end up failing. Karen leaves, and Plankton realizes how much, I guess, he misses her and then gets her back at the end. Like I said, I don't really hate this episode, but man, is it boring. Well, don't you guys want to see a rough, rocky relationship between Plankton and Karen? Doesn't that sound like a fun episode to watch? I don't know, it's just so weak in writing, too. Everything moves at a snail's pace, and all the robots Plankton builds are just so boring. Plus, Plankton is very rude to Karen in this episode. So, why watch this one? I know this episode is a lot like the episode in Season 8, Karen 2.0. A lot of people really can't stand Karen 2.0 because of how mean Plankton is in that episode. Which, yeah, he's definitely mean in Karen 2.0, but at least in Karen 2.0, we actually had some sort of story to go along. Here, Plankton's just grumpy, so he takes it out on Karen. Like, what is the fun of that? And sure, maybe he was meaner in Karen 2.0, and maybe the fact, that he actually built a brand new wife to replace her rather than just mindless robots is meaner, but at least Karen 2.0, I felt like they tried. This one is just a bunch of Season 6 nonsense, and I just don't like this one. So while a lot of people prefer this over Karen 2.0, I 100% prefer Karen 2.0 over this episode. Just such a boring mess of an episode. Now let's move on to number 9, which is There's a Sponge in My Soup. Oh man, I love Season 11, but unfortunately there is a few bad episodes. There is a Sponge in My Soup just really rubs me the wrong way. Although when people talk about bad Season 11 episodes, usually episodes like Ink Lemonade or Cuddly Hugs pops up. There is a Sponge in My Soup I never see pop up, and that's strange because man, this episode gets so old very quick. So there's a bunch of hippies hanging out at the Krusty Krab, so Mr. Krabs tries to scare them off, but instead of scaring them off, he scares them inside, and for some reason they hang out in the soup of all things? I don't know why how is it possible that 3 grown fish, whatever, can fit into this very small pot of soup? Like, sure, it's a big pot, but big for soup, not for 3, ay, ay, ay. And of course, you guessed it, they don't leave. They are the thing that wouldn't leave. My favorite. First we get SpongeBob and Patrick breaking into Squidward's house. Now we have these 3 very unlikable hippie characters just in the Krusty Krab, in the soup of all things. So SpongeBob goes in to try to get the hippie characters out, but that fails. And now SpongeBob is one with the hippie. And then Mr. Krabs, I guess, is also one with the hippie. But it's more of just a way to get SpongeBob out of his ways, I guess? I don't know. And then the episode ends with these three very unlikable hippie characters now in Squidward's bathtub. Okay, very odd ending to a very bad episode. Usually, Krabs is one of my least favorite characters in the show. He can be super unlikable in some episodes, but in this episode, I am all for him. These hippie characters are so unlikable, and they spend the whole episode just freaking trying to make them leave. Like, yes, that is a very good episode. I would much rather see something like Bottle Burglars, or literally almost anything else from this season. This episode just really rubs me the wrong way. These hippie characters are just so, like, nothing against hippies, but I don't know. It just made this episode really boring, not gonna lie, and I just didn't like the, I don't know, I just found them annoying. And yeah, this is definitely one of the more weaker Season 11 episodes, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to number 8, which is Surf and Turf. Oh man, not another Season 11 episode. Ay, ay, ay. One of my favorite seasons. Definitely, okay. So, Sandy Cheeks, do you know her? There's another bad Sandy episode in the same season, Squirrel Jelly, but that's more well known. Surf and Turf is more not as known, or not as, I guess, I don't know what the word is, but it ain't talked about like Squirrel Jelly is. So the episode starts with Sandy destroying her house. Hooray. Like, that's exactly what I wanted to see. This already tells me this is going to be a lousy Sandy episode. She's destroying her house. The stuff she wants to win a ship-in-a-bottle contest, but she can't build them right. So she gets Mr. Krabs to build them, and while yes, Mr. Krabs is very picky and a little annoying, I guess it ain't as bad as what happens later. So Mr. Krabs chops down Sandy's tree, bad idea, Mr. Krabs, and builds a boat out of her tree. And, of course, that's going to make Sandy very pissed. So Sandy goes on chasing Mr. Krabs, wanting to hurt him for what he did to the tree. Have you ever seen Sandy throw a fit? Well, now you have. Because Mr. Krabs takes the, I guess, her house to the contest or whatever to win the money, and the whole time Sandy's chasing him, trying to get it back. And once they finally do get to the contest, Mr. Krabs wins because it's the only one intact. But Sandy comes and destroys her house, and then Sandy wins. And then the episode ends with her literally forcing Mr. Krabs to build a fake tree. Oh yeah, and if he refuses, she will shock him. Okay, never miss with Sandy. I don't know what to say by the end of this episode. Is it a bad Sandy episode? A bad Mr. Krabs episode? What is it? And yes, I do understand. Mr. Krabs did sort of chop down her... Well, I guess he did chop down her tree and build the boat. But... I don't know. I feel like Sandy just threw a very big temper tantrum. And then... And that's weird because 2 seasons earlier, we got the one where she was selling the nutty butter or whatever, and she could care less about her tree, but now all of a sudden her tree is literally all her? Like, okay? Even though Mr. Krabs can be very annoying, I think she snaps way too quickly at him, and it gets very annoying, especially the fact that she ends up winning, gets what she wants, and shocks Mr. Krabs, and literally tortures him and makes him build her own tree. And yeah, I guess Mr. Krabs sorta deserved it, but at the same time, it just doesn't. He just doesn't. There are way better episodes that Mr. Krabs deserves stuff. Like in the same season, for example, Shopping List. You know, when Sandy beat up Mr. Krabs in that episode, at least it felt rewarding and it felt like Mr. Krabs deserved it. This episode, Mr. Krabs was only helping out Sandy like she badly wanted him to do. So, yeah, I just don't understand this one at all. Mr. Krabs is okay, Sandy is super unlikable, and yeah. Definitely a bad Season 11 episode that I don't hear many people talk about. Now let's move on to number 7, which is Senior Discount. So this strange Season 12 episode. And while Season 12 was one of my favorite seasons, with episodes like SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout, Broken Alarm, I could go on and on with some very good episodes from Season 12. Senior Discount, on the other hand, ugh. And yeah, I've already talked about this in the worst Season 10, 11, 12 episodes, but I mean, I just never hear people say Senior Discount is a bad episode. I mean, that doesn't mean they don't like it or hate it, but when it comes to Season 12, I feel like episodes like the Nitwitting are ones people talk about. Which, agreed, that episode is pretty bad. Bad Patrick episode, but Senior Discount is a bad Old Man Jenkins episode. This episode goes on and on about the stupid Senior Discount joke. It is not funny. Kind of like there's a Sponge My Soup episode where the hippies wouldn't leave, Old Man Jenkins wouldn't leave. Wouldn't leave any of us alone, that is. I feel like they tried to go on with a joke that just wasn't funny. Like, for example, Mr. Krabs turns down or turns up the heat, and Old Man Jenkins is cold for some reason. I don't find that really funny. Or like, Mr. Krabs turns on loud music and Old Man Jenkins fell asleep. And honestly, he's just super annoying in this episode. Old Man Jenkins usually ain't annoying. Like, there's a lot of good episodes with Old Man Jenkins in it. From the same seasons even, like Farmer Bob, for an example. That episode was much better. But he's just so annoying in this episode. Just because he's older than Mr. Krabs, he gets a quote-unquote senior discount, which means only half a quarter. It's just so random and so weird. It's just a drag. The only part that I sort of liked about the episode is the part where Mr. Krabs and Old Man Jenkins bring back their past selves. That part was sort of funny, but the rest of it was just a drag for a Season 12 episode. No thanks. I'll stick to Broken Alarm or SpongeBob's Birthday Blowout, or literally almost any other episode from Season 12. Besides Quarantine Crabs, we don't talk about that one. Anyway, let's move on to number 6, which is Squid on Strike. Wow, what a way to end one of the best seasons of all time, Season 2. My opinion, the best original SpongeBob season. Wow, okay, Squid on Strike is something. So, it's simple. Squid is on strike. The title says it all. And he has SpongeBob along with him, and they both have to prove to people that the Krusty Krab is unfair. But guess what? They both not somehow, but they both end up convincing people that it's the best food ever, and then more people want to go to the Krusty Krab, and it just makes matters worse. And then SpongeBob destroys the Krusty Krab. But Mr. Krabs hires Squidward again. So then now the Krusty Krab is destroyed, and now the episode just kind of ends. What? I feel like a lot of people only like this episode because it's in the original era. Seasons 1, 2, and 3 is the original era of SpongeBob. And I think that's the only reason why people like some of the bad episodes from these older seasons. Is because it's from the original era, therefore it's a classic and it's nostalgic. But honestly, it just ain't that good. Like, do you like the episode for the story, or is it because it's nostalgic? Because I don't find either one part of this episode. This episode could have easily fit into a Season 6 episode, and I would have never blinked an eye. I just find it so painfully slow and boring. And while there is a few good jokes in there, most of it is just so painful. Plus, Mr. Krabs is also really annoying in this episode too, so, I mean, that all ends up working out, sort of. I don't know. But, I don't know, there's just nothing to this episode. It's just so square and boring. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think there's some Squidward torture in there too. Man, an ending to one of the best seasons of all time ends with this dumb one? No thank you. Everything just feels very awkward and weird, especially when Mr. Krabs goes and rehires Squidward. it's just really awkward and weird. Like, I don't know. This episode just really is just, ugh. Like I said, I feel like this episode is only liked because it's in season 2, one of the original seasons. So it's more liked for the nostalgia, probably than more the story. Which I can see, but at the same time, come on. This better than something like Single Cell Anniversary, Broken Alarm, the frickin' birthday episode? I don't think so. And I know there is a lot of people who don't like the modern seasons, but I think that's just because it ain't nostalgic like the original ones. And I certainly can't agree. I love the modern seasons, and I honestly can consider them maybe even better than the original seasons. They're just something brand new. I don't hear about them as much. They're not overrated like these episodes are. Okay, enough of me raging. Squid on Strike is just a boring Season 2 episode that could easily would have been in Season 6 and I wouldn't have blinked an eye. Now let's move on to number 5, which is The Paper. I know, I've already talked about this before in the worst Seasons 1, 2, and 3 episodes, but I mean, I don't get why people don't I don't get why people like this episode. I just can't stand it. I think when it comes to bad Season 1 episodes, a lot of people say something like, I was a teenage Gary. That's the one that usually pops up when it comes to bad Season 1 episodes. But I never see The Paper anywhere, and honestly, I just can't stand it. It's about SpongeBob playing with a piece of paper, and, I mean, I guess the ways he plays with it is sort of interesting. The only thing is that he's kind of rubbing it in Squidward's face, too. And once Squidward literally sells everything to SpongeBob to get this piece of paper, it doesn't work for him. So, yeah. It's like now we're back to square one by the end of the episode. Except for the fact Squidward doesn't even have a house or even a shirt anymore. It's just a dumb Season 1 Squidward torture episode. And that's weird saying original SpongeBob episodes have Squidward torture. But they do, they just weren't really popular till like Season 4. Even back when I was a kid, I found this episode so boring, and it kind of is. It's just a big pile of nothing. It's just about the paper, and that's it. The title says it alone. It's just another one of those dumb, let's find the most simplest thing and turn it into an episode thing. Something like Bubble Stand works, because, that episode was actually funny. But the paper, I don't like it. Like I said, there's much better episodes. Idiot Box, for an example. That's another better episode, too. Yay. Bad episode for sure. I've already talked about it, though, so let's just move right on to number 4, which is Club SpongeBob. Oh, goody. From one Squidward torture episode to another. Yet again, I've already talked about this in the worst Seasons 1, 2, and 3 episodes, but this episode is so overrated. Yet again, I just feel like people like this episode because it's in Season 3, the best season. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not my favorite. In fact, it's the worst of the original seasons. I find it way too overrated. Club SpongeBob is just, such a bad taste in my mouth episode. And while, there is people who don't like this episode, I find a lot of people saying episodes like Party Pooper Pants are the bad Season 3 episodes, which it is, but you can't find anything else? You can find all these bad episodes in Seasons 10, 11, and 12, but you can't find bad episodes in Season 3? I think I can find a lot more bad episodes in Season 3 than those ones. Yet again, I think this is just an episode people like because it's nostalgic and it's in Season 3. Not because of the story, but because it's just nostalgic. It's one of the original episodes. Which I can sort of see, but at the same time, yet again, I could easily see this in Season 6 and I wouldn't blink an eye. Hooray, we got like 3 Squidward torture episodes in a row now. And this one is the worst out of them all. So they end up in Kelp Forest or whatever, and then they listen to this dumb conch shell, and they sit and do absolutely nothing, which leads to a lot of sandbagging. Oh, but then food comes, but they can't ask the shell if they can eat it. They just take it. But Squidward has to ask if he can eat it. He can't just take it like SpongeBob and Patrick. No. He has to ask. And of course, SpongeBob and Patrick eat the food right in front of his face, yet again, rubbing it in his face. I don't understand what is so funny about Squidward getting tortured. He doesn't deserve it. It ain't funny at all whatsoever, and it's just so pointless and makes for weak episodes. It makes you think, were they even trying when it came to this episode? Like I said, though, I've already talked about it, but it's just such a bad one. I don't understand why people like it. I guess that's their own opinion, but good lord, this is a bad one. Alright, I'm done. We're moving on to number 3, which is Sandcastles in the Sand. Yeah, no, I already talked about it in the your favorite episodes from season 6, or from every SpongeBob season. And yep, we're back. Sandcastles in the Sand. The best original episode is Band Geeks. The best mid-season episode is Sandcastles in the Sand, and the best modern episode is Mimic Madness. That's how I think kind of goes. Sandcastles in the Sand is, yes, from the dreaded Season 6. What could possibly go wrong? It's not like it's in Season 9, 10, 11, 12, or like the original seasons. No, it's put right into Season 6, so what could possibly go wrong? So, SpongeBob and Patrick go to the beach. Patrick rips his skin up. Very disgusting. SpongeBob and Patrick go on the bus. It takes them like 5 minutes to get to the beach because, you know, it's season 6. They want to keep it as filler as possible. SpongeBob and Patrick make sandcastles. SpongeBob's being nice and trying to help Patrick. Patrick, a big crybaby, and is being very rude and mean to SpongeBob, and starts sandcastle war. SpongeBob's spineless and doesn't care that Patrick is getting away with all these things. SpongeBob and Patrick build giant sandcastles. It kind of feels a little unfair, and it feels like Patrick is getting, like, the upper hand here. Patrick pretends to get hurt, but that's only to distract SpongeBob to get him hurt. Wow, what a nice friend. And then the episode ends with the two still fighting and having to clean up the beach. I'm sorry, but I just don't like this one. Like, I find it one of the weaker Season 6 episodes. I'm sorry. I know it's loved by many, but for me, it just ain't for me. Like I said before, we have Snowball Effect from Season 3, and we have Battle for Bikini Bottom in Season 5, and both episodes are done so much better. It's just so... they're both so funnier, and just... they're done so much better than this one. This one just feels like a slog. And yeah, I do know... I guess at some parts the castle battle was fun, but it just felt like things were a lot more fair when we got Battle for Bikini Bottom in Season 5. Plus, it was so much funnier. Same with Snowball Effect. Patrick wasn't as annoying in this episode. But man, this one, I just can't stand him at all whatsoever, and he is so annoying. No, it's not the worst episode from Season 6, or the worst Patrick episode, but the best mid-season SpongeBob episode? I don't think so. Absolutely not. I'm glad you guys can enjoy this one, but it is not for me at all. You guys watch this one. I'll watch Snowball Effect and Battle for Bikini Bottom. Now, let's move on to number 2, which is Crabs vs. Plankton. Usually when bad Season 4 episodes come up, usually that's stuff like Driven to Tears, Rule of Thumb, or Good Neighbors. Crabs vs. Plankton, on the other hand, doesn't ever come up. So Plankton slips on the floor and pretends he has a brutal injury. So he sues Mr. Krabs, and now they have to go to court. And Mr. Krabs gets a lawyer who also slips on a wet floor, and now SpongeBob is the lawyer. So then we get a long, drawn-out scene at the courthouse with just stuff happening. I don't know, it's just so boring. And then Mr. Krabs is innocent and Plankton is guilty, because guess what was in that suitcase that SpongeBob, of course, couldn't open or figure the combination of? A Krabby Patty. And Plankton falls for it, and yeah, okay. A lot of the Krabs versus Plankton episodes are fun, but man, this just has to be one of the weakest ones. They go to court. Come on, this is just so lame. It's just so boring, too. I would much rather see these two fight at boating school like they did in season 11. Now, that is a good Krabs vs. Plankton episode. This one is just so dry and boring, and the whole Plankton faking his injury is just so, ugh. It's even worse than Accidents Will Happen from season 8, the one where Squidward fakes his injury. Because at least in that one, Squidward is the punching bag. It's nice seeing him get some, respect, especially from Mr. Krabs, but this one just took it way too far. It just made me hate Plankton by the end of this episode, and that's saying a lot since, Krabs ain't my favorite either, but, what do you expect? It's just a weak season 4 episode. And there are two much better Crab and Plankton episodes in this season. The New Leaf and Best Frenemies, both being much better than this episode. I just don't have words for this one. I find it super boring and just not for me at all. And yeah, it ain't as bad as Good Neighbors and that stuff, but the best season 4 episode? Absolutely not. Not even on the better half. Okay, before we hit number 1, let's talk about the honorable mentions. And like I said, there's a decent amount of them, so stick with me. Muscle Bob Buff Pants. This one is just such a boring season 1 episode in my opinion. Did you know that SpongeBob ain't as strong as Sandy? What? I didn't know that either. Well, guess what? You get an 11-minute episode explaining that. And because SpongeBob is weak, he gets these anchor arms that make him look really strong. And it's just such a predictable, boring mess. I also don't like the way that Sandy rushes things either. She puts SpongeBob in the anchor contest, although he clearly doesn't want to, and ends up getting mad at SpongeBob. I don't know. I just don't like this episode at all. Plus, I hate episodes where it shows SpongeBob being the weakest thing in the world. It's just so boring. But unlike episodes like Rip Pants from the same season, or even something like Larry's Gym, it's just a 1-second thing and it's done, and they move on. But no, this episode takes the whole time explaining why SpongeBob is weak. The whole thing with him not being able to lift the drink or even the straw is just so filler and ain't even funny. Basically, this episode is just a pointless, filler, predictable mess. Definitely one of the weaker season 1 episodes. Neptune Spatula. Wow, talk about a weak character introduction. Besides Merman Man and Barnacle Boy's character introduction, Neptune probably has to be the worst character introduction out of them all. It's just done so poorly, and they make him look like this terrible dude. He laughs and mocks SpongeBob for looking like he's too weak to pull this spatula out of the whatever, and then he challenges SpongeBob, and yeah, his patties taste pretty bad. And SpongeBob's one patty actually tastes pretty good, and I don't know, it's just another one of those boring, predictable, bad Season 1 episodes. The one and only thing I liked from this episode is Patrick's eyes and mouth on his pants now. That's the only funny thing. Other than that, it's a bad episode. Gary Takes a Bath. Oh, you knew I wasn't going to miss this one. I've already talked about it to death, though, in my worst Seasons 1, 2, and 3 episodes, so I decided to leave it off the list, although a lot of people really don't say Gary Takes a Bath is a bad episode. Usually stuff like Pressure, or squirrel jokes, or Dumped is a lot worse. And of course the infinite I Am With Stupid episode. But Gary Takes a Bath is never noticed, which is odd because I consider it probably the worst SpongeBob episode of all time. I've already explained it though, it's a bad Season 2 episode. It's just a terrible Gary episode. No one likes this dude. Just kidding. I don't like this dude. Now let's move on. I'm not even going to try to explain this trash. Oh yeah, and by the way, it's not the worst. Yours, Mine, and Mine is worst. I completely forgot about that episode. Alright, now let's move on. Procrastination. Now, there's times I like when SpongeBob episodes are relatable, then there's other times where it's just like, okay, that's too far. And Procrastination is definitely one of them. I think it's just because it's too relatable. I was literally SpongeBob back when I used to have homework all the time. I hated homework. That's the one thing I dreaded about school. Frickin' homework. It's like, why do schooling at home. Home is supposed to be the place, you take a break from school. So, because I was always a SpongeBob, procrastination is definitely very relatable to me. I mean, the episode ain't bad. There is some good parts of it, but because it's so relatable to me, it's just eh. I watch SpongeBob get away from real life, not to be reminded of real life. Although I don't have to worry about homework anymore since I did graduate, but this episode still is not my favorite. Sandy, SpongeBob, and the Worm. We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else. That's literally the only good joke about this episode. Ay, another Sandy episode, hooray. I feel like this episode is really overrated. I mean, it can be considered a classic Sandy SpongeBob episode, but Sandy, yet again, is just really annoying in this episode and too blind. And while a lot of these original SpongeBob episodes really show it almost seems like SpongeBob and Sandy are siblings, that's just so boring. I'd much rather see them as friends, like in Tea of the Tree Dome, or literally anything else. Sandy, SpongeBob, and the Worm just almost makes it feel like they're siblings, and they're both in a bad mood. Or sorry, Sandy's in a bad mood. She will not listen to SpongeBob at all whatsoever. She won't even let him speak. Good lord. And then she beats up the Worm's tongue, notices it's the Worm, and then apologizes to SpongeBob. Goodness gracious, Sandy. Like I said, there are better SpongeBob and Sandy episodes. Other than that, there's just nothing else going on in this episode. It's a pretty boring Season 2 episode. As seen on TV. Bleh. Such a boring Season 3 episode. Yet again, no one ever talks about that. They all agree that Party Pooper is the worst of Season 3 and everything else is pretty darn good. Well, I'm sorry, but even everyone's favorite season has some bad episodes in it. As seen on TV, I consider yet again another one of these overrated episodes. It's just SpongeBob thinking he's famous because he was a little bit in the way of the commercial, and you can sort of see him. So now he thinks he's really famous and that everyone loves him. Wow, what an originally fun idea. It goes to the point where he sings a song about a striped sweater. Even if people do like this jingle, it's just so boring in my opinion and very weak. I'd take like almost any song from Season 5 through up over this one. You know what, scrap that. I'd take any song from Season 4 on up over this song. And I'd probably take any song from Season 2 over this song too. So, yeah, it's easily the weakest song. One of the weakest SpongeBob songs. And then the episode ends with SpongeBob cooking Krabby Patties. Because apparently that's what everyone wants. So we're back to square one. It's another one of those dumb, sandbagging filler episodes. Yes, even Season 3 has some filler episodes in it, and this one is just so boring. There's not really any good jokes in it either. It's, yet again, not for me. All that glitters. Yeah, I've already talked about this in the worst Season 4, 5, and 6 episodes, and my opinions remain the same. It's just a boring SpongeBob loving his spatula thing, and it's just so weird. Well, nah, I guess they didn't really focus more on him loving it. It's more like losing a friend. But man, SpongeBob got tortured badly in this episode. From losing his house to literally his shirt and pants to getting a spatula, paying all of his money to a spatula that's very rude to him, and then he throws a giant temper tantrum like he does in Grandma's Kisses. Hooray! What a good episode. I don't know what the word is. To interpret, I guess the word is. Now, a lot of people say that the bad one is Putty Love from the next step from Season 5, which agreed, I think it's worse than All That Glitters, but that one is talked about to death. This one ain't talked about as much. I think it's safe to say SpongeBob should not be falling in love with objects anymore. Now let's move on. Porous Pockets. Man, talk about a sluggish episode. And yes, we are in Season 5 now. And while some episodes are pretty good, a lot were just so boring in this season. SpongeBob and Patrick become rich. SpongeBob is this big, rich, fancy guy, and that's about all you get in this episode. It's just so plain and boring. I guess it ain't necessarily bad, but it's so boring it is bad. We're moving on. Summer job. Who likes Mrs. Puff torture episodes? Well, here you go. Mrs. Puff is trying to get away from SpongeBob. SpongeBob wants to give Mrs. Puff a note in the most annoying way possible. Mrs. Puff crashes into the Krusty Krab. So Mr. Krabs blackmails Mrs. Puff, literally his girlfriend, and says, "Oh, you can work here, then I won't tell anyone." What a nice boyfriend. And of course, that means she gets to work with SpongeBob. And then she finally, explodes, gets out of the Krusty Krab, and drives away. Litters and goes to jail for it, plus driving classes. And I bet you can't guess who the driving teacher is. SpongeBob. What kind of sense does this make? This isn't even a story at this point. This is just more of a, you know what, let's see how much we can make Mrs. Puff miserable episode. It's just as dumb as those Squidward torture. They aren't funny, and I don't understand what's funny about them. Mrs. Puff and Squidward goes to jail more than Mrs. Puff goes to jail more than anyone else, but the true villains like Plankton and Mr. Krabs go to jail the least. What kind of sense does that make? Yep, this is a bad episode. For sure. Don't feed the clowns. Yet again, a lot of people more say Ink Lemonade and Cuddly Hug, Squirrel Jelly, those are the worst ones of Season 11. And while I do agree those three are a lot worse than this episode just it feels like a drag every time I watch it. This clown fellow is just so unlikable, just a very boring square character. It's just, It's such a boring side character, and it just makes the whole episode boring, not gonna lie. It's not terrible or anything, but it's just so boring in my opinion. King Plankton. Yeah, I already talked about this one in the worst season 10, 11, 12 episodes, but King Plankton is just one of those bleh episodes that not a lot of people talk about. A lot of people say season 12 overall is just a pretty meh season with a few exceptions in there, which I personally can't see at all. I find it a good season with some bad episodes here and there, barely even bad ones. But hey, do you want to see an episode where you hate everyone? Well, here you go. Plankton is annoying in this episode, the chimps are annoying in this episode, Patrick, of course, is annoying in this episode. It's just a whole annoying mess, and that's all I have to say about this episode. No thank you. But at least we're done with the honorable mentions. So now let's get to number 1, which is the secret box. Oh boy, this one is something. So, Patrick has a secret box. And nobody can know what's in it. Not even Squidward's house. So, of course, all you curious people are probably like, come on, Patrick, just show us what's in it. And I mean, come on, Patrick, why hide what's in the box? So that goes on the whole episode, so even to the point where SpongeBob shows him all of his secret stuff and wants Patrick to show him his secret box, but of course Patrick doesn't because he's Patrick. So SpongeBob breaks into his house to steal the secret box. Nothing wakes him up except for SpongeBob saying "phew" really quietly. And of course it's just such a weird episode. It feels like Patrick cares more about this stupid box more than literally anyone else. And yeah, it is revealed that it is just a string, but with pulled, it's a picture of SpongeBob at the Christmas party. For some reason, whenever I think of it, I just think of Christmas Who. The one that Squidward takes as SpongeBob. That's the picture that comes to mind when I think of this episode. Because, I mean, they both were in the same season, so I don't know, maybe it was. I don't know, it's just such a bland episode in my opinion. Patrick is super annoying in this one, and I don't know, I just find it very overrated. I can understand why people would like this one, but for me, it's just not for me. There's much better box episodes, like The Idiot Box, for an example. I'm sorry, but the secret box is just not for me. Oh boy, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you probably tomorrow, actually. Bye.